Throughout human history, certain practices have transcended cultural boundaries while remaining mysterious to outside observers. Among these, geophagia, the deliberate consumption of earth, soil, or clay, stands as one of the most widespread yet misunderstood human behaviors. Documented across 6 continents and spanning millennia, this practice challenges our conventional understanding of food and medicine. Join us as we explore how this seemingly strange habit represents a complex intersection of traditional knowledge, adaptive biology, and cultural identity that continues to intrigue researchers across multiple disciplines. Geophagia has been documented across 6 continents and throughout human history, with archaeological evidence suggesting the practice dates back at least 2,000 years. In ancient Mesopotamia, archaeologists have discovered clay pots specifically designed for earth consumption, indicating how established this practice was. The kaolin region of Georgia in the United States became so renowned for its edible white clay that the material itself became known as kaolin. This wasn't just a localized phenomenon. Indigenous communities in the Andes have practiced geophagia for centuries, consuming a clay called pasa, often mixed with potatoes to neutralize toxic glycoalkaloids present in certain potato varieties, a sophisticated understanding of food chemistry that predates modern science. In parts of sub-Saharan Africa, specific clay deposits are carefully harvested, processed, and even sold in markets as traditional food items, showing the economic and cultural significance of these materials. The cultural importance of earth-eating varies dramatically between societies, often extending far beyond mere consumption. On Tanzania's Pemba Island, pregnant women consume a specific clay called mabundu, which holds such cultural importance that it's often given as a gift during pregnancy, a practice that combines nutrition, medicine, and social bonding. Among certain Aboriginal Australian communities, geophagic practices are tied to spiritual ceremonies and coming-of-age rituals, demonstrating how earth consumption can be deeply woven into cultural identity and spiritual beliefs. The preparation of edible earth is rarely casual, it typically involves elaborate processes. The clay is carefully selected, dried, ground, and sometimes heated to enhance its properties. In some cultures, it's mixed with other substances like salt or spices to improve palatability or efficacy. This sophisticated processing shows that geophagia isn't simply impulsive dirt eating but a carefully considered practice with specific methods passed down through generations. In historical Europe, certain medicinal clays were so valued for their therapeutic properties that they became traded commodities. Clay from the Greek island of Lemnos was particularly prized and stamped with official seals to prevent counterfeiting, a system remarkably similar to how wines or olive oils receive protected designation of origin today. This historical European example challenges the notion that geophagia was limited to non-Western or pre-modern societies. Far from being merely a bizarre cultural quirk, geophagia may serve several crucial biological functions that have only recently been understood by modern science. Research from Cornell University suggests that clay consumption can effectively bind to dietary toxins, protecting consumers from harmful compounds found in foraged foods. This protective function may explain why geophagia is particularly common during pregnancy in some cultures. The practice potentially shields the developing fetus from environmental toxins during this vulnerable period. The clay's binding properties also combat nausea, which might explain its prevalence among pregnant women experiencing morning sickness. Beyond toxin protection, certain clays contain significant amounts of essential minerals including calcium, iron, and zinc, potentially serving as mineral supplements in regions with nutrient-poor diets. This nutritional benefit isn't merely theoretical. A 2011 study published in the American Journal of Human Biology found that women practicing geophagia in Tanzania had measurably higher hemoglobin levels than non-practitioners, suggesting a potential adaptive benefit related to iron absorption. This finding challenges the simplistic view that geophagia is merely a harmful habit or eating disorder, instead pointing to possible evolutionary advantages that may have sustained the practice across diverse cultures. The medical community's understanding of geophagia has evolved significantly over time. What was once dismissed as purely pathological behavior is increasingly recognized for its potential adaptive functions. The binding properties of clay materials, particularly those rich in kaolinite, create a protective barrier in the intestinal tract that can adsorb mycotoxins, bacterial toxins, and plant secondary compounds that might otherwise cause illness. This protective function may be particularly vital in tropical environments where food spoilage occurs rapidly due to heat and humidity, and in regions where people rely on wild plant foods that contain natural toxins as defense mechanisms. Evolutionary biologists have proposed that the instinctive urge to consume Earth may have developed similarly to how many animals instinctively seek specific minerals when deficient, suggesting geophagia might be an innate adaptive behavior rather than merely a learned cultural practice. Some researchers have even proposed a more novel hypothesis, that geophagia might function as a form of environmental probiotics, introducing beneficial soil-based microorganisms to the gut microbiome. While this hypothesis remains controversial and under-researched, it points to the complex relationship between human health, diet, and the environment that traditional practitioners may have intuitively understood. While often associated with developing nations, geophagia persists in industrialized countries as well, challenging the notion that economic development necessarily eliminates traditional practices. In the American South, kaolin consumption continued well into the 20th century, with commercial products like white dirt still available in some rural markets today. The medical community generally classifies persistent geophagia as a form of pica, an eating disorder characterized by the consumption of non-nutritive substances. However, this classification remains highly controversial among anthropologists and cultural researchers who argue it pathologizes a culturally significant practice with potential benefits. This tension between medical and anthropological perspectives highlights how cultural practices can be misinterpreted when viewed solely through a Western medical lens. Modern health concerns surrounding geophagia include potential soil contamination with heavy metals, parasites, and industrial pollutants, risks that weren't present in pre-industrial societies. A 2013 analysis of commercially available clay in Cameroon markets found concerning levels of lead and arsenic in some samples, illustrating how modern environmental degradation can transform once safe traditional practices into potential health hazards. Despite these risks and medical concerns, an estimated 200+ million people worldwide still practice some form of geophagia, making it one of the most widespread non-conventional dietary practices on the planet. The globalization of geophagia presents entirely new dimensions to this ancient practice. Online marketplaces now sell premium edible clays, often marketing them as detoxification aids or natural supplements, despite lacking FDA approval for such claims. This commercialization has created tension between traditional practitioners who view earth eating as cultural heritage, medical authorities concerned about unregulated consumption, and entrepreneurs capitalizing on the practice for profit. The traditional context of geophagia is being transformed by modern market forces. In urban settings across Africa and Asia, industrially packaged clay products have replaced traditionally harvested materials, raising questions about quality control, cultural authenticity, and the loss of traditional knowledge about proper selection and preparation. Medical professionals increasingly encounter geophagia in multicultural clinical settings, creating challenges for culturally sensitive healthcare that respects traditional practices while addressing potential health concerns. The practice exists in a regulatory gray area in most countries, neither entirely accepted as traditional medicine nor completely banned as a dangerous behavior. This ambiguous status reflects the complex nature of geophagia as both a cultural practice and a health-related behavior that doesn't fit neatly into modern regulatory frameworks designed primarily for conventional foods and medicines. Recent scientific interest in geophagia has shifted toward potential pharmaceutical applications, creating an unexpected bridge between traditional practice and cutting-edge medicine. The binding properties that make clay effective at absorbing toxins in traditional use have inspired research into clay-based medications for modern healthcare. Pharmaceutical companies have already developed products like kaopectate, originally kaolin-based, and various clay-derived antidiarrheal medications that utilize the same principles that traditional practitioners have understood for centuries. The potential of clay goes beyond simple binding properties. Researchers at Arizona State University are investigating how certain clays can combat antibiotic-resistant bacteria through ion exchange mechanisms, a sophisticated property that traditional users couldn't have described in scientific terms but may have observed through the clay's effectiveness against infections. This research represents a fascinating case where traditional knowledge is informing cutting-edge medical research in unexpected ways. Meanwhile, cultural anthropologists continue documenting the practice as it adapts to modern contexts, including the emergence of online communities where practitioners share information about sourcing and consuming various clays. These communities represent a modern evolution of traditional knowledge sharing, adapted to digital platforms but preserving core elements of the practice. This ancient practice, once dismissed as primitive or pathological, is now recognized as a complex phenomenon at the intersection of culture, biology, and human adaptation. The study of geophagia has become increasingly interdisciplinary, bringing together experts from fields that rarely collaborate. Geochemists are now mapping the mineral profiles of traditionally consumed clays to understand their potential nutritional contributions and mechanisms of action. Their work reveals that clays consumed in different regions often have similar mineral compositions despite being separated by continents, suggesting convergent discovery of beneficial earth types. Ethnopharmacologists study how traditional clay processing methods, such as heating, washing, or mixing with other substances, might enhance beneficial properties while reducing risks. These investigations often reveal sophisticated traditional knowledge that optimized clay properties through methods developed over generations of observation and experience. The emerging field of nutritional anthropology examines geophagia as part of broader food systems rather than an isolated behavior, considering how earth consumption interacts with other dietary practices and cultural contexts. This holistic approach helps explain why the practice persists in some communities while disappearing in others. Perhaps most promising is new research into the clay microbiome relationship, with preliminary studies suggesting certain clays may selectively inhibit pathogenic bacteria while leaving beneficial microbes untouched, a sophisticated property that could have significant implications for gut health. As scientific understanding evolves, geophagia serves as a potent reminder that traditional practices often contain sophisticated knowledge that precedes and sometimes presages scientific discovery, challenging researchers and healthcare providers to approach cultural differences with humility and curiosity rather than presumptions of superiority. As scientific interest in geophagia grows, important ethical questions emerge about the relationship between traditional knowledge and modern research. Who benefits from the pharmaceutical applications of clay properties that traditional communities have understood for generations? Issues of intellectual property, cultural appropriation, and equitable benefit sharing become increasingly relevant as traditional practices become sources of commercial and scientific value. Some indigenous communities have begun documenting their geophagic practices not only to preserve cultural heritage but also to establish prior knowledge claims in case of future bioprospecting or pharmaceutical development. Conservation concerns also arise as traditionally harvested clay deposits face threats from development, mining, and environmental contamination. These locations aren't merely sources of material but often hold cultural and spiritual significance for the communities that have used them for generations. The preservation of both the physical deposits and the knowledge systems surrounding their use represents an important intersection of environmental and cultural conservation. Healthcare providers working with multicultural populations face the challenge of respecting traditional practices while addressing legitimate health concerns. Developing culturally sensitive approaches requires understanding geophagia not as a simple good or bad practice but as a complex behavior with potential benefits and risks that vary depending on context, materials, and individual circumstances. The future of geophagia may depend on finding this balance, preserving valuable traditional knowledge while adapting to modern environmental and health realities. Geophagia stands as a profound example of how human practices that appear strange to outsiders often contain sophisticated adaptive knowledge developed over generations. From ancient Mesopotamia to modern pharmaceutical laboratories, the consumption of earth has transcended simple categorization as either primitive behavior or medical disorder. Instead, it represents a complex intersection of cultural tradition, nutritional adaptation, and medicinal practice that continues to yield new insights across multiple scientific disciplines. The binding properties of clay that protect against toxins, the mineral content that supplements diets, and the potential microbiome effects that modern science is only beginning to understand, all suggest that traditional practitioners recognize benefits that Western medicine is now rediscovering. As we face global challenges in healthcare, nutrition, and cultural preservation, geophagia reminds us that traditional knowledge systems deserve not dismissal but serious study and respect. The Earth Eaters of diverse cultures across 6 continents and throughout human history weren't engaging in primitive behavior but participating in a sophisticated practice at the intersection of food, medicine, and cultural identity, one that continues to challenge our understanding and expand our knowledge of human adaptation and ingenuity. Thanks for watching. Please like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon for updates. Your feedback is appreciated. We hope to see you again.